Hello, and welcome back to Baby Elias's stories. We now return to Blade Runner 3, Replicant Night, by K.W. Jeter. Chapter 15. That son of a bitch! She splashed cold water onto the bruise that had begun forming along one side of her jaw. Small, but darkly colorful. It looked like a smoky red LA sunset as viewed from the top levels of the no longer existent Tyrell Corporation headquarters. I knew I shouldn't have trusted him. Sarah fixed her angry glare at her own reflection in the hovel's bathroom mirror. Angrier at herself than Deckard, she had known what kind of a schmuck he was, and she had still let herself be conned by him. I want you. The memory of those words in her mouth pooled salt on her tongue, tasting like the blood from the cut lip Deckard's blow had given her. The perfect image of a woman wronged. She looked at herself with contempt. I trust you. Typical. She knew. They'll say anything. Get you to say anything, and then they're gone. Right after the fist is applied. She emerged from the hovel's tiny bathroom, toweling her face, punishing herself with the wincing pain from the bruise. At least the chair near the bed was empty. The hallucination of the Rachel child vanished for the time being. Deckard, for whatever twisted reasons were in his head, had kept up the act of pretending that the girl was real right up to the moment he was beyond the hovel's front door and out of earshot. She didn't even want to speculate why. Probably just to drive me crazier. As if that were possible. Mrs. Neiman, you know, it's not too late. The calendar on the wall had spotted her. The hectoring voice had taken on an irritatingly superior tone. There are still viable options. What? She scowled at the calendar and its too perfect scene of trees and distant mountains. What are you talking about? You can still kill yourself. These things can always be arranged. Just because Deckard is gone, that doesn't mean you have to change your own personal plans. Oh, I like that. Sarah shook her head in amazement. Suicide as a viable option. That's good. Well, or therapy perhaps, the calendar said helpfully. Some other kind of therapy, I mean. You were talking about that, remember? In regard to these hallucinations you feel you're suffering from? Now, in my opinion, and you can certainly take it for what it's worth, I feel that surgery would be your last option. That's a little extreme. Just shut up. She reached over and ripped the calendar off the wall. You traitorous bastard! Telling Deckard to go ahead and shoot me. She flung the calendar into the corner of the bedroom, where it landed with a fluttering squawk. You're lucky I don't have a gun right now. That was the problem. Out in the hovel's kitchen area, as she rummaged through the cupboard over the sink looking for the meager stash of coffee substitute, Sarah weighed her options. If I had the gun, she thought grimly, I probably would. Kill herself. She hadn't changed her mind about that. There was just no way that appealed to her as much as the finality of a bullet through the head. After being so tritely humiliated by Deckard, she didn't want to employ any less violent method. Anything like a drug overdose or a Plathian head in the oven genuflection that smacked of feminine frailty. After all this time, she had to admit that she was of the blood of Eldon Tyrell in more ways than one. If she could crack her own head open like an egg, she would have. She brushed away a trace of white dust on the sink counter and spooned the ersatz coffee into a chipped-edged cup. Her jaw still ached, reminding her, as if she could forget, of Deckard. He probably enjoyed that. Even more than the hit, the mind trip, the getting her to believe that he was ready to die with her. Turning on the tap, she held her hand in the thin stream of rust-tinged water, waiting for it to heat up. Well, she thought, her Tyrell blood bringing her own discussions back into focus. If he doesn't want to go voluntarily, that's all right. She held the cup under the tap and watched it slowly fill. There are other ways. Pulling a chair out from the table, she sat down with the fake coffee in front of her. It tasted like brackish plastic. I should have brought some real stuff back here from the yacht. There had been every indication that it had been stuffed with the expensive pleasures of life, as one would expect from a part of the late Eldon Tyrell's private fleet. However bleak her situation might be otherwise, she wasn't without resources. She supposed she could find a way of unloading the yacht's contents and the yacht itself on the emigrant colony's black market. Perhaps she could track down some high-up exec in the Martian cable monopoly who'd give her a package deal for the whole thing, rather than having to dispose of it piece by piece. Either way, it had come to a good deal of operating capital. More than enough with which to buy Deckard's murder. She took another sip of the repellent black liquid, holding the cup between both hands. She didn't need to. The muscular tremors of her rage had died down, replaced by cold, nerveless calculation and regret. She wished now that she hadn't gotten rid of Wycliffe and Zwingli. She could have used them. If nothing else, they had been her only means of getting in touch with the rest of the Shadow Corporation. She imagined that there were others dedicated to the Tyrell resurrection, and among those, former members of the security department, hard men and deadly. Those were the ones she really needed now. She didn't feel like waiting for them to show up at her doorstep, the way the first two die-hard loyalists had appeared. Another slow, meditative sip. Her tongue almost numb to the taste. She'd have to think of some way of contacting the Shadow Corporation. A sharp, quick sound came from behind her. Someone had knocked on the hovel's front door. That's too good, thought Sarah. She carefully set the cup down on the table. Either the universe, in its mysterious and infinite workings, had learned to read her mind, or her hallucinations had become even more convenient. All she had to do was ask for something, and it would be provided, with only one catch to it. She turned around in the chair facing the door. "If you don't exist," she called out, "then go away. I don't need you." A muffled response came through the thin fiberboard. "Hello?" The knob rattled, as though the person on the other side had tried it and found it locked. "Is there anybody home?" If it were a hallucination, considered Sarah, I would have given it a key. She got up and went to the door, pulling it open. The man on the hovel's doorstep was shorter than her, running too fat, as if compressed from a taller size. "You must be Sarah," he smiled, blinking at her from behind ordinary-seeming lenses. If he was part of the Shadow Corporation, he hadn't adopted the same square black rims as the late Wycliffe and Zwingli had. "Sarah Tyrell? Am I right?" It struck her that hallucinations shouldn't need introductions. Maybe he's real. "You could be." She put her hand against the doorframe. "Depends on who you are." "Miss Tyrell, my name is Urbanton. That's all I go by." His smile broadened, creating more elaborate details in his round cheeks. From his breast pocket, he extracted a business card and offered it to her. "That's how people know me." She looked at the card, holding it by one corner. The man's name appeared beneath larger letters, spelling out Speed Death Productions, with a company logo of a stylized, sharp-edged skull with wings. Charming. She tried to hand it back to him, but he refused it with an upraised palm. "Keep it." The man radiated an oily unctuousness, as though his excess body fat were percolating into the air around him. "Just in case we can't come to an agreement right now, Miss Tyrell." "How do you know my name?" Sarah tilted her head, eyeing him with increasing suspicion. "My real name." "I've got a lot of contacts," said Urbanton with a wink. "Contacts are important in my line of business. I'm a video director, producer too. I do it all." A memory fragment drifted through Sarah's head. The names of both the man and his company sounded vaguely familiar to her. Deckard had said something about them a long time ago, before he had left the planet the first time. Something about going to do a job for them. "That's how he knows my name," she thought, "because of Deckard." She tucked the business card in her neckline. "What's that got to do with me?" Urbanton glanced around the narrow, shadowed streets of the emigrant colony, then back to Sarah. "May I come in so we can talk?" "We're talking now." She folded her arms across her breasts. "As I said, what's that got to do with me?" His smile appeared more forced. "Let's just say that maybe we can do business together. You and me." "Oh?" She raised a skeptical eyebrow. "Such as?" "I have good reason to believe, Miss Tyrell, that you'd like to have a certain Rick Deckard taken care of. Murdered, as it were." The smile disappeared, replaced by a hard glitter in the man's eyes. "How would you like it if I made that possible for you?" Sarah regarded the man for a few seconds, then stepped back, clearing the doorway. "Perhaps," she said, "you'd better come inside." "This'll do for now." He steered the child toward an opening beneath words outlined in flickering light bulbs, half of which had gone permanently dead. "Let's go in here." Behind the bar, an unshaven figure swabbing out glasses with a dirty towel. He spotted Deckard and the Rachel child as soon as they stepped into the dimly lit interior. "Hey!" The bartender pointed a black-nailed finger toward the little girl. "No minors!" Deckard left the girl a few steps away from him. With the briefcase dangling from one hand, he leaned an elbow on the bar. "Let me tell you something." He kept his voice low, face close to the bartender's. "I was just talking with somebody who claimed that there's no little girl at all. She's a hallucination." An ugly smirk curled the other man's lip. "Yeah, right. Now get her out of here. Opening his jacket partway, Deckard displayed the black metal of the gun he'd taken from Sarah. About that hallucination. Some very influential people think the same way. The bartender's eyes shifted from the gun back up to Deckard's face. There's a real nice booth in the back, suitable for a party of one. He tried to smile. Like yourself. Thanks. Deckard peeled a bill from the rapidly diminishing roll in his pocket and laid it on the bar. I really value my privacy. The establishment was dark enough, and so sparsely inhabited that he was able to steer the Rachel child to the back with little fear of being spotted. Once away from the bar and its pallid fluorescence behind the ranks of bottles, the only illumination came from the video screens hanging at strategic intervals from the ceiling. A flickering wash of blue tinted the isolated faces gazing up, their hands cradling the carefully nursed drinks that kept the patrons from being 86'd out of the place. None of them looked around at Deckard and the girl slipping into the farthest booth. Eyes remained on their stimulus fix from the cable monopoly. He stashed the briefcase beneath the table. Won't he call us in? That guy? The Rachel child, had easily figured out that Deckard was trying to keep them from being spotted by the emigrant colony's police. The evasive route that he had taken them on this far left little doubt. You don't trust him, do you? Of course not. Deckard didn't look at her, tucked into the darkest part of the booth and shielded by his own body. Eyes adjusting, he scanned the bar's interior for any suspicious indicators. He was grateful that Batty, the part of him embedded in the briefcase, had heeded his warning about staying quiet in public. But we don't need to worry just yet. The bartender will keep a lid on it for a little while, just on the hope that I'll feed him some more money. Is a little while all we need? The child's voice was capable of unnerving him. She sounded on occasion like an adult, asking questions with a child's sharpness. Deckard supposed that came from her unusual upbringing, whatever it had been on the Salander 3. I just need time to think, he said, glancing over at her. If I get that, maybe we have a chance. Oh, the Rachel child mulled over his words, forehead creasing. What are you going to do? I said, time to think, not talk. He was rewarded with silence. Spreading his hands flat on the table, he leaned his head back against the booth's padded leatherette and closed his eyes. Not interested in the show, huh? Deckard's eyes snapped open at hearing not the child's voice, but a man's, even before he focused on the figure that had slid in on the table's other side. His hand had darted inside his jacket and fastened onto the gun. He wasn't quick enough. The other man was quicker, reaching across and seizing Deckard's wrist, pinning his hand beneath the jacket. You don't have to do that. The other man smiled. Think of all the commotion it'd make in here. Nice, quiet place like this? He squeezed the wrist tighter, numbing the fingertips on the gun's cold metal. Perfect for a little conversation. The Rachel child had shrunk back into the booth, watching the two men to either side of her. Yeah, it's lovely. The speed of the other man's movement indicated some kind of professional status. If not cop, then something equally deadly. Deckard nodded slowly. Very intimate. I knew you'd agree. The thin smile had remained on the other man's face. Now, I'm going to let go of you, and then we can just sit here politely, looking at each other without things getting all ugly between us. I'm going to do that, Deckard, because I know you really do want to talk to me. The bit with the gun, I'll just chalk that up as a nervous reaction on your part." The other's hand still hadn't let go of Deckard's wrist. "I don't go in much for conversation." "You will." The man loosened his grip slightly. "Because you either talk to me, or you can forget about going much farther than this bar. Your ass is in the proverbial sling, Deckard. I can get it out." Deckard was silent for a few moments, then nodded. "All right, let's talk." "You're a smart man, Deckard." He let go and sat back in the booth, folding his arms on the table. "Or smart enough." "Who is this?" The Rachel child sounded annoyed as she scowled at the broad-shouldered figure. Deckard didn't answer her, but looked closer at the other man, letting the angles of the face assemble and connect with one in his memory. "I know you," said Deckard. "You were there at the Outer Hollywood station. I remember now." The whole scene flashed through Deckard's mind, including the corpse of David Holden, laid out in a reproduction of the interview room at what had been the Tyrell Corporation headquarters in LA. "You were the one who killed that Kowalski replicant right in front of me." "That's right." The man looked pleased with himself, as though flattered by Deckard's recall. "There really wasn't time for proper introductions. The name's Marley." He extended his hand across the table again, as though to shake Deckard's. "Or at least, that'll do for now." Deckard looked at the hand in distaste. "You must be joking." "Not about this." The man shrugged and pulled his hand back. "You're a tender-hearted soul, aren't you? It's not as if you hadn't ever killed any replicants." "I never went around bragging about it." "Ah, I see. The money was enough for you." Marley appeared even more amused. "Well, Deckard, you don't have to like me. You just have to, shall we say, do business with me." The constant, self-assured smile irritated Deckard. "What kind of business?" Marley didn't answer. He looked up to the nearest video screen. "You're right, you know. This isn't too interesting." Some kind of sporting event that involved oxygen masks and a medical triage staff at each end of the playing field was on. "That's all right, though." He turned the smile back toward Deckard. "There's something better coming on in a few minutes." "I'm not interested in the cable schedule," grated Deckard. "Just tell me what you want from me." "You've got it all wrong, pal. It's what you want from me. I spent a great deal of time and effort tracking you down, just so I could offer you my help." Deckard didn't return the man's smile. "I don't need it." "Oh, I think you might," said Marley. "You've got a big job ahead of you. What do you know about that?" The other man shrugged. "Bits and pieces, or maybe the whole thing. You're trying to put together some travel plans, aren't you? For you and the little girl here, and someone else? Or should I say something? I guess it depends on how you regard that briefcase you've been toting around. Is it human enough for you to think of it as a person?" "Hey!" Batty's voice sounded from beneath the table. "Fuck you, pal!" Deckard gave the briefcase a kick. "Shut up. Let me handle this." "You tell him," said Marley. "That old bastard's out of the loop now. He's luggage. Too bad you can't just wrap him up, stick the postage on, and mail him out to the far colonies." "Who says that's where we're going?" Deckard wondered just how much the man sitting across from him was clued in on. I could be taking him and the little girl anywhere. Maybe back to Earth, for all you know. But you're not. Marley's smile broadened. And I do know. I know all about the job you've undertaken. I know that's what you're racking your brains over, trying to figure out how you're going to get off planet with that thing, how you're going to deliver it to the replicant insurgents. The whole bit. Deckard coldly regarded the other man. You know an awful lot. More than you do. I know what's really in that briefcase. The smile faded, the man's face turning hard and serious. And I know who the little girl really is. Somebody who knows things like that. Or somebody who even claims to. Deckard looked straight back into the other man's eyes. Chances are good it means that person's a cop. So who are you working for? UN Security? LAPD? I'm not with anybody like that. Marley glanced up at the video screen. You should think of me as your friend. Like I said, I'm here to help you. And like I said, I don't want... Hey, just hold on a bit. Marley held up his hand, palm outward. We can talk some more in a little while. But this, he pointed at the video screen a couple of yards away. This is going to be a good program. I really want you to take a look at it. I think it's something you'll get a bang out of. Beside him, the Rachel child had sat forward, trying to get a better viewing angle. Deckard looked over at the screen. The sports event, whatever it had been, had apparently ended. The Cable Monopoly's logo, all swirling colors and state-of-the-art abstract graphics, danced and shivered its pixels. He knew it wasn't going to be a news show. There weren't any. The cable's feeds were all entertainment, or what passed for it in this captive market. You know, said Deckard, I'm not really interested in whatever soap opera you might be addicted to. Maybe you should watch this on your own time. I've got more important business to take care of right now. Not any more important than this. Trust me. Marley gave a nod toward the screen. This is just about the most important thing in the universe for you. Just sit back and watch, all right? The cable logo faded out and was replaced by another one. A stark, black and white graphic of a stylized skull with wings. Deckard recognized it even before the words Speed Death Productions pulsed into view. The skull image and the video company name had been on the advance check he'd received from that sweating, pudgy director he'd walked out on back at the outer Hollywood station. It took a moment longer to remember the guy's name. Benton. The recall prompted a slow nod from Deckard. That was it. In the bar's muffled quiet, the sound of a cheaply synthesized soundtrack. All throbbing bass and disembodied string choirs oozed out of the video monitors as tiny speakers. Deckard found himself watching intently, leaning forward across the table, despite his earlier scorn. On the screen, a black night vista was suddenly broken by a leaping gout of fire. That looks good, Marley nodded admiringly. Real spooky and dramatic. The title appeared on the screen, blanking out everything but the darkness behind it. 2 words. Blade Runner. What the hell? A surmise weighted with dread started to form inside Deckard. A crawl of other words, smaller than the video's title, moved upward across the screen. Broken phrases lodged in Deckard's head, based on a true story, from actual LAPD case records, with their meaning slowly adding up to the realization of what he was seeing. The final piece locked in when he saw his own name listed in the opening credits as technical advisor. Marley pointed to the words. "That was nice of that Benton fellow, don't you think? Considering that you voided your contract with him, he didn't have to leave your name on there. This is the video he was making." With a sick feeling, Deckard gazed at the screen. "That he hired me to go out there and help him with." "Come on, he hired you for more than that," chided Marley. "Benton bought your life story, or at least that part of it that went down in LA when you were tracking that last bunch of escaped replicants. Well, here it is." He made a sweeping gesture toward the nearest monitor and all the other identical screens mounted in the bar. "This is the premiere showing right now on the entire Martian cable network." Another smile. "See? I knew you'd dig it." "Shit." Deckard stared at the video monitor in dismay. The fury of his own thoughts drowned out anything coming from the audio track. "Everybody's going to see this. Everybody on this entire planet." "That's right, pal." Marley's hands made an expansive gesture, as though in congratulation. "There's only one channel, and you're the star. It's your 15 minutes, Deckard. Enjoy it." Deckard didn't have time to respond to the other man's sarcasm. This was something he hadn't counted on. "Now I'm really screwed," he thought. In a few minutes, once the video got past its opening sequence, with all the artsy Los Angeles location shots that Benton had faked from the outer Hollywood street sets, once the story got rolling, Deckard's own story, then it would be his own face up on the video screens, not just here in this bar, but everywhere. Nice, big close-ups, all zoomed in and personal. He had watched Benton directing the cameras during the video shoot, bringing them in tight on the actor in the distinctive long coat, carrying the police-issue gun through the city's dark and rain-soaked streets. There had been some full-on shots that would very likely fill the monitor screens. "And it'll be my face," he thought. "Not the face of the actor playing me, but my face." That had been the other thing that he'd sold the rights to. That Benton and his Speed Death Productions had bought, spelled out in precise contractual language. The undersigned contracting party, in consideration of the financial remuneration specified above, grants as well the right to use a full and accurate facial depiction of self, along with any associated physical mannerisms consisted with an identification of the portrayed individual as the former Los Angeles Police Department special agent known as Rick Deckard. That was what he'd agreed to, the contract he'd signed, back when he'd still been under the impression that the money from Benton would be enough to get him and Sarah Tyrell off Mars and heading out to the UN's colonies in the stars. Deckard hadn't anticipated being on the run, with Christ only knew what kind of police agencies breathing down his neck. It was a wonder he hadn't been nabbed already. The suspicion had started to grow in him that the cops were giving him a long rope, seeing if there was anybody else he'd entangle before they picked him up. Eventually, they'd tire of that game, get tired of waiting for him to contact his non-existent accomplices, and then Deckard would find the rope around his neck where it had always been. It was going to be a lot easier to tighten that noose now. or as soon as this video had finished airing over every cable-linked monitor in the immigrant colony. When Deckard had been there at the outer Hollywood station, orbiting above Earth, Benton had even shown him how the special effects people were going to digitize his face, from the bones up through the web of muscles to the skin and every whisker, stubble, and freckle on it. Every little detail that made up the world-weary, tired of killing but still deadly gestalt that Deckard saw when he looked in a mirror. Standard practice in the modern video business. In post-production, once the principal photography was done, the techs would lay the digital face over that of the actor who had gone through the paces on the set, who'd hit the marks and had the prop guns fired at him, taken the hits from the other actors, done all the hard stuff. And what the audience would see when the video was broadcast would be a reconstituted Rick Deckard walking those garish, milling, neon-streaked LA streets again, just as the real one had, gun in hand, eyes scanning for his prey. That's what they're going to see, thought Deckard, right now. The only chance he'd had was based on anonymity, on being able to move through the immigrant colony's crowds without being spotted, on hiding out in the open, his face hidden in the torrent of other faces. And now that was going to be taken away from him. They're going to see me, my face. On the monitor screens, the video's opening credits had ended. The camera angle had dropped from the fire-laced night skies above LA, crossed by the screaming flares of the police spinners to street level. The reflection of a neon dragon, red tongue darting through a crudely animated sequence, shimmered on the wet asphalt. A figure in a long coat, shoulders hunched with fatigue, was seen from the back as the real Deckard watched from the booth. The video's all-seeing eye moved in on his taped double. Then a quick cut, the shot going to a front angle, tight on the Deckard figure's shirt beneath the open coat's lapels, buttoned to the top with a costume department duplicate of the rough woven tie he'd always affected back then. The shot moved up to the image's face, a close-up in good lighting, a noodle bar's bright fluorescence driving away any concealing shadows. The real Deckard winced, anticipating what he was about to see. He didn't. In the booth, in a cheap dive somewhere in the Martian immigrant colony, Deckard stared in amazement and with an uncomprehending sense of relief at what he saw on the monitor, echoed simultaneously on the screens throughout the bar. "That's not you," said a small voice behind him. The Rachel child looked past Deckard and Marley on either side of her toward the nearest screen. "I thought this was going to be about you and everything, about stuff that happened to you before, but that doesn't look anything like you." "No." Deckard continued to watch the video image. The Deckard there, the figure reenacting the story of those nights in LA, had moved away from the camera and into a medium shot. The face was still visible, though. "It's not my face." "Now, that is interesting." No surprise registered in Marley's voice. "You weren't expecting that, were you, Deckard? I was getting kind of a kick out of watching you. Really thought your cover was about to be blown, huh?" Deckard said nothing, but just nodded slowly, still watching the image on the screen. The Deckard that didn't look like him. "Something must have happened," continued Marley, "for that Benton fellow to change his plans like that. I know that wasn't the original deal. They were going to CG your face on top of that actor's. All he had to do was go through the motions, and it would wind up looking like you were doing all that stuff all over again, hunting down those replicants like the bad old Blade Runner you used to be. I know. Deckard felt a measure of tension easing out of his spine. The dismaying prospect that every other face in the bar would turn toward him, connecting him with the image on the video monitors, had vanished. If the police agencies were going to put out the net for him, they would have to do it without the advantage of having every person with eyes doing their spotting for them. That's a break. You figure it's just luck? The director, Herb Benton, just happened to change his mind? He looked over at the other man. No. Deckard shook his head. I don't have that kind of luck. If I ever did, nothing happens without a reason. For anybody not in the kind of position you are, that would be considered paranoia. For you, Deckard, it's the beginning of wisdom. Whatever relief he had felt over the broadcast of the video and the absence of his face from it was replaced by the suspicions he had for this character. I don't have to be real wise, buddy, to wonder what it is you want from me. What do I want? Marley looked back at him with wide-eyed, feigned innocence. Like I said, I want to help you. And the way I do that is by stopping you. Stopping me from what? Come on, Deckard. I'm way ahead of you. The naive mask had dropped from Marley's face. I know what you're up to. You've accepted a little job, haven't you? The fact that you're carrying around that talking briefcase only goes to prove it. If you had any sense, if all you were interested in was saving your own skin, you would have ditched it by now. Marley tilted his head toward the other occupant of the booth. Same with the little girl. Nice kid, but she's only going to slow you down. That's my problem, said Deckard. Oh, exactly. Marley's thin smile returned. It's your problem because it's your job. The job you've taken on for the rep sims of getting that briefcase and its data contents out to the insurgent replicants. Deckard stiffened. If you know all that, and you want to stop me, then you must be some kind of cop. You'd have to be working for the authorities. Not at all. The smile grew wider. I'm with the rep simps. For a few seconds, Deckard thought that one over, then slowly nodded. Sure you are. You blow away that Kowalski replicant right in front of me, and then you come and tell me that you're working on behalf of the replicants. You really think I'm going to believe that one? Shooting the Kowalski replicant? Marley shrugged. Regrettable, but it had to be done, and not even all that much to be sorry about. He was pretty much at the end of the 4-year lifespan that the Tyrell Corporation had built into that model, so he didn't really lose that much. And besides, there are other Kowalski replicants. That's a pretty cold attitude. Deckard studied the other man. At least I had the grace to develop a guilty conscience over what I'd done. Good for you. Deckard's words had left Marley unfazed. That must be why you got picked for this job you're doing. Guilty consciences screw up people's heads, make them easy to manipulate. Like you. Otherwise, if you were thinking straight, you would have been able to figure out a few things about the situation you're in. Yeah? Like what? Work on it, Deckard. The other man leaned closer across the table. You think because I've said I want to stop you, to make sure you don't get that briefcase and its data out to the insurgents, you think that must mean I'm with the authorities. Have you ever thought that it's exactly the authorities, the police, the UN, whatever, who want you to get that briefcase out to where you've been told it's supposed to be delivered? Hey! The voice of Roy Batty piped up from beneath the table. Don't listen to this guy. He's trouble. Deckard glanced over to the monitor screen where the Deckard of the video, still wearing the actor's face, was talking to somebody in a set that was supposed to be the LAPD's high-ceilinged main headquarters. He didn't hear the character's words, concentrating instead on what the figure across from him had just said. Look at it this way, continued Marley. The cable monopoly here does whatever the authorities tell it to do. That's why it gets to remain a monopoly. If UN security tells the monopoly to run this video or that one, he pointed to the screen, then it gets broadcast all over the colony. Same way with Benton and his little Speed Death Productions company. If he wasn't in tight with the police before, it wouldn't take much pressure, if any, before he'd do whatever they tell him to. Especially since he doesn't owe you any favors. If they told him to cut the computer graphic effects, the dubbing in of your face over the actor who was playing you, he'd do it in a second. Benton wouldn't care if it helped you or hurt you. Just the kind of guy he is. Deckard had to admit that Marley was right, at least as far as that part of the analysis went. I think I'm starting to see what you mean. I bet you are. You're not totally stupid, Deckard. If the police and the UN security forces and everybody else who should be after you, if all those people wanted to find you and stop you from carrying that briefcase out to the insurgents, they wouldn't have let that actor's face stay in the video that's being broadcast. They would have told Benton to go ahead with his original production plans and dub your face in there, so that everybody in the immigrant colony would know what you looked like, so they could put out a bulletin, offer a little reward, and there would have been no place you could hide. We wouldn't be sitting in this cozy little hole having this conversation. The police would have hauled your ass away by now. It made sense. Or put another way, the video broadcast didn't. This was their chance, thought Deckard, to make sure everybody knows what I look like. And it hadn't happened. The corollary of the principle that, for him, everything happened for a reason. Not paranoia, but wisdom. A survivor's assessment of how the universe worked. Was that when things didn't happen, that was also because somebody wanted it that way. Then that would mean, Deckard slowly picked through his own words, it would mean the authorities don't want to stop me. They don't want to catch me. They want you to get away. On the other side of the table, Marley regarded him with evident satisfaction, pleased with the impact his arguments had made. So the question you have to ask yourself now is, why? Why do they want me to get away? Deckard rubbed his mouth with a knuckle. They must have a reason. It's not you, pal. Marley seemed to be taking pity on him. If it's any comfort to you, nobody's ever considered you to be that important, so you needn't bother building up your ego now. It's what you're carrying, the job you've undertaken. Got it? He smiled. It's the briefcase. They want you to deliver it. Not the rep sims, but the authorities, the police, the UN. All of them. The bad guys. I told you! Batty's voice shouted louder from beneath the table. The briefcase vibrated against Deckard's shin. I told you this guy was trouble. He's messing with your mind. Don't listen to him. The Rachel child leaned to one side in order to talk to the briefcase. "It's okay," she said in a soothing tone. "Nothing bad's going to happen to you."
"Christ!" spoke Batty disgustedly. "I don't need this. You people are all screwing up big time. Man, I wish I still had legs. I'd walk out of here right now and take my chances on my own. I'd let you all just sit here until you rotted away. Shut up."
Deckard resisted the impulse to give the briefcase another kick. Problem is, the guy's making sense. "That's not a problem," a smile and a shake of Marley's head. "It's your salvation, Deckard."
"God damn it, don't listen!"
Batty's voice had gone up enough in volume to require action. Angrily, Deckard reached down and grabbed the handle, pulling the briefcase up and slamming it down hard on the table. He looked around to see if anyone in the place had noticed. As far as he could discern, the bartender and the patrons scattered among the tables were still watching the dimly lit adventures of the recreated Deckard in the video. "Listen up," said Deckard, laying his hand on top of the briefcase's lid. "You're getting on my nerves. You keep yelling and carrying on, somebody's bound to think that's a little unusual, and I don't really feel like attracting attention right now. Understand?"
"You're the one who doesn't understand."
Batty's voice had turned sulky.
"You got a job to do, and this asshole is getting in the way."
"I don't care what I agreed to do." He pulled his head back. "Just shut up and let me work this out, or so help me I'll leave you at the nearest pawn shop and I'll take the $2 I'll get for you and spend it on aspirin. I'm not joking." The briefcase said nothing. It radiated a silent, sullen fury. "Good call." Marley nodded approvingly. "You're the one in charge. Remember that." "Fine." The anger boiling up in Deckard hadn't abated. "I'm in charge. Then I want answers. I want to know what's going on. Right now, without any more cute shit from you." "All right." Marley laid both his large, boned hands on the table. "I'll give you the short and sweet version, if you think your little mind can handle it. The briefcase here," he tapped on it with one fingernail, "it's not what you think it is. It's not what you've been told." "Yeah? So what is it then?" Marley smiled coldly at him. "You're carrying a bomb."